Want to go through real quick agenda. So there is a ton of material to cover that could be covered here, especially if we did any kind of deep dive. I'm going to try to keep this high level. I'm going to try to keep this about 30 or 40 minutes max and save time for Q&A at the end. So just keep that in mind that, there's a lot of details here I'm not going to necessarily go into. Um, Here's the agenda. So kind of go through an introduction. We do have a special offer as part of this webinar, so stay tuned for that. I'll give you some information on how you can access that special offer. And then as far as the topics, I think you all probably saw this from when you signed up for the webinar, but we're gonna go through style and aesthetic trends, we're gonna go through user experience and interaction, we're gonna go through performance and technology, and then we're gonna go into development tools and platforms. And then at the end of that, we're gonna have a Q&A session. All right, so a special offer. For anyone attending this webinar, we're going to be providing a free mini audit. What this is spend about 30, 45 minutes going through your website, walking through the usability, the technology, the aesthetics and design, and kind of provide some feedback on some tangible things that you can do to improve your website performance. We'll look at all these different kind of factors from a high level and provide that back to you as feedback. So normally we charge about $250 to go through this initial audit, but we're providing today for free. We don't usually provide free offers as part of our webinars, but I'm not going to go into the details on that. I'm laughing because there's some subtleties about that. But yeah, for this particular offer, we're going to be providing that for free. But if you stay around until the end of this webinar, we'll provide some instructions for how you can sign up for that. So first, a little about me. My name is Dustin DeVries. I'm the co-founder here at Caffeine Interactive. I've been doing website development for about 30 years. 30 years, maybe a little bit of a stretch, but it's definitely over 25. I think I started doing, probably built my first website back in 95, 96 maybe. Remember helping my dad with my parents with their painting business, build a website. And so, um, working on that with them, and then have kind of evolved over time and seen all the different iterations of website development. So I've kind of seen it all. 'Cause I was one of the early adopters, I guess, of the internet and doing website development on the internet. So let's get right into it. First topic is going to be on style and aesthetic trends. And so there's a lot of things here to consider when we think about style and aesthetics, but I'm going to kind of break it down into two or three different pieces. Minimalist design and custom illustrations are kind of go hand in hand. So put those together. You could make the argument to break those apart. Then dark mode. So let's talk a little bit about what minimalist design means. And so um, kind of your uh, last several years, we've gone into kind of this grid approach to website design, where you think about a website. You have a website, say it's 1,100 pixels wide, roughly. You design to a certain width. Of course, you have responsiveness where mobile devices are more narrow, and so you have responsive design that will adapt to those different orientations. But essentially, minimalist design is kind of, or that was kind of the approach for a long time. And it still is. It's still a very sound approach to this, but we're starting to see as people starting to break out of those grids. And even though you may have a width of say 1,100 pixels, you have to design for that. Not having things where you say, well, this button's going to line up in the first grid. If you see if you can see me here on the screen, do it from this side. So if you had like, maybe have the say like a header, right? You have the logo would be in the first grid, then the next 5 grids might be your navigation window, and then over here might be a contact button kind of grid layout. That still applies. You still want to have that even spacing. We're starting to think less about those grids and kind of more free form. And with that becomes more of an immersive experience, having more design, more color, more artistic kind of aspects to the website, and then of course custom illustrations. So it'd probably be better to share it through a visual. So I'm going to show you an example of a site that we recently did that's kind of more of a grid-based design and one that's not so much. Both of them are minimalist designs with custom illustrations. So let me switch over here real quick. Let's see. Okay, here's a website we did for a company called Pioneer Acquisitions. They're based up in the Northeast. They're a real estate investment firm. You can see here, it's a nice, clean, just very visual, very open kind of website. Again, it's kind of based on a grid because you can see you've got the logo up here, then the navigation on the right. As you scroll down, though, you see nice bold visuals, nice bold fonts, plenty of space. Things aren't real crowded. This isn't necessarily a trend of 2025. This is a continuation of a trend that maybe started a couple of years ago of going more minimalist in your design. But this is one that we built for this company. Just kind of get an idea of like the imagery is really important and just kind of trying to make it more an immersive experience, starting from the very beginning when you come to the website. This is what you're presented with. Um, I'm going to show another website, and I'm going to give a plug out to one of our partners, Jana Yun, with Studio JNY, studiojny.com. We've been working with her on a few of these different, actually, some of the projects she has listed on her website. We've been working on her with as well. She's a great designer, does amazing things, and we've worked in tandem with her on a few of these sites. So one of the ones that we've been working on lately is a site called Nourishing Minds. It's a website for the Seattle Public Library, as you see here. And this is a site that's actually in progress. We haven't actually launched this yet, so you wouldn't be able to find it online. But you can see here, custom illustrations, wide, bold kind of interface in terms of the uh, style of it and everything else. Um, and as you scroll through, you can see there's some interactions like with some animations that come through. You can see the clouds moving off here to the side, some different things going on. Again, this is a work in progress. I don't want to go too deep into this website, but it kind of gives you an idea of what I'm talking about when I'm talking about minimalist design and more artistry, more immersive type of approach. Um, and by the way, if you're looking at this and you're thinking, I've got uh, I'm a B2B company and I'm a plumber, for example. I wouldn't expect, I mean, I don't know, as a plumber, you could go something bold like this, but you might want to go more simplistic, more kind of business centric, and maybe a little more scaled down from this. And that's certainly fine. As I tell people, if I'm building a website for, retirement community, that's going to look a little bit different maybe than say a website for a bunch of teens. And so you want to be aware of that audience, or say, businesses, or like if I'm selling to uh, investors, that's going to look a lot different than say website that I'm building that's meant for young adults. And so you want to be aware of that audience as you think about your designs. So let me go back here. The other thing that I'm not going to pull up the slides just yet. I'm going to keep my screen share because the other thing I want to talk about real quick is dark mode. This is another kind of emerging trend that we're seeing a lot when we think about website design and trends. Dark mode isn't something necessarily new. It's been around now for a couple years at least, as people think more about energy consumption, and it can be for altruistic reasons, like you want to make the planet more green, or it could simply be because you want to save battery life on your phone. Either way, it's still kind of the same and different reasons for the same end goal, which is to conserve energy. And so dark mode has kind of been one of those things that's come along. Um, and so going into dark mode, this right now I've got up our website. Let me go back here. I had this up earlier. Okay, so this is you probably saw this website when you signed up for the webinar, this page. So this is Elementor. It's built on Word. So this is a WordPress website. We're using the Elementor theme, which has kind of a WYSIWYG approach where I can come in and, I can make changes directly, to the text. I can add text in and publish those changes and they'll show up. I'm not going to save anything here. But what I wanted to show though is within Elementor, I can come in here and I can go into user preferences. Oh, sorry, I was waiting for something to pop up on here. It's over here on the left. User preferences. You see here, there's a display mode. You can select between light mode, dark mode, or auto detect. And one important thing to note with website designs and doing dark mode, when you set it like on your device, whether it's a mobile device or Windows or Apple-based PC, um, or tablet, whatever, typically you can set dark mode preferences, like do you prefer dark mode or light mode? And your browser will tend to inherit those. So like, for example, on my Windows 11 PC I'm running here, I've set dark mode as on. And so I can actually set, by setting that, when I go browse the web, if I go to a website, it can detect whether I prefer dark mode or light mode, and it can adjust the view of your website, based on dark mode or light mode. Here I'm and this is the editor, so it's going to show it in light mode. This is kind of the default editing. I can go in and change those dark mode preferences. for this page or for any page. But I can also come in here, I'll show you this. If I go into site settings, then global colors. Here I can set my color palettes with an Elementor for my entire site. So I can specify what colors I want to use. And I can also do things like I can set it to I can have like a dark mode palette, I can have a light mode palette, and I can adjust that. But I want to show you another little trick. If you're using Elementor, or even if you're not using Elementor, if you're using Divi or using, some custom theme that, from like Theme Forest or someone like that, there's another really cool tool called WP Dark Mode you can install in WordPress. And again, some of the content I'm going to share today is going to be more WordPress centric. I guess that's by design because we do a lot of WordPress development when we think about websites. That doesn't mean WordPress is perfect for everything. When we start thinking about apps and developing, web or mobile-based apps, certainly WordPress is not the preferred platform for that. But if you're just looking for like anything from brochure sites, even if you're looking for something a little more complex, like maybe you have an events calendar and ability for people to come in and sign up and register for events, or maybe you have a shopping cart. WordPress is still a great platform for that. So that's why I'm kind of doing everything WordPress centric. And there are other platforms we're going to talk about later that are trying to compete with WordPress. But just for the sake of argument, right now we do a lot in WordPress, and I'm going to kind of stay focused on WordPress just to show how it's done here. And those other platforms, there's equivalent features like this to be able to allow for dark mode capabilities. But the WP Dark Mode is a plugin you can install on WordPress where once you install it and enable it, dark mode just works. And so you can say enable front end dark mode. I can set it to, default to light mode, default to dark mode, or use the system settings. It'll detect based on what you have, like when the user comes in, if they've got dark mode turned on their device, it'll automatically show them the dark mode version of their site. And it actually does a pretty good job of taking your website, if you already designed it in kind of a light mode centric approach, it'll make some changes automatically to convert over to dark mode. And then you can go in and uh, modify that or customize it. There's ways to set your to customize your color settings and all of that. So if you're using WordPress and you want to get dark mode, install WP Dark Mode. You can kind of get dark mode right out of the box with your website. And again, that's looking at emerging trends. That's one of the new trends that we're starting to see a lot of. Okay, I'm gonna go back here. Sorry, I'm bouncing around. Go back to the presentation. Okay, onto user experience and interaction. So the kind of the three big bullets here are accessibility, AI, and voice user interfaces. And so I'm going to tackle these each individually. They do kind of interrelate, especially the last two bullets on here. But if we look at accessibility first design, um, what are we talking about? So, it's been quite a while now that we've had, I don't remember exactly when it was passed, but the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed here not too long ago. And there's another standard called the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG, which is kind of attached to ADA. So ADA is basically a law that was passed in the US. And I think there's equivalent, laws in other countries that basically, it says that if you're a business, if you're doing business within the United States, you're expected to conform to certain standards in regards to Americans with disabilities. So, for example, if you have a restaurant, you need to have, handicap accessibility for that restaurant. Um, so a lot of times we think of it more in terms of brick and mortar, but it actually does have an application within web design and, website development. And so, how does that look in terms of website development? So imagine if you had, visual disability or, maybe it's a disability in regards to eyesight or something like that, visual disability, uh, so hearing or visual, whatever it might be. The idea is that you build your website should be able to allow people with those disabilities to still be able to absorb the content and interact with your website. Now, it's a lot easier said than done, as you can imagine, because it's much more difficult to build a website that caters to that than to just build one that kind of caters to the majority that maybe don't have those disabilities. So there's been a lot more done in regards to making the web more accessible to those with disabilities. Um, and so the way that typically works is when you build your website, you add extra parameters and extra directives into the website to allow for people with disabilities. So think about, like, let's say if I was going to your website and I had some sort of visual disability. I had a hard time reading text. I might use a screen reader, and I mentioned some screen readers here that the people use: NVDA, JAWS, VoiceOver. These are screen readers that people with disabilities would use to go to a website and actually be able to read the content on that website without being able to see it. And keep in mind that, I mean, it could be anything from someone with an actual vision disability to, as you get older. I mean, I've got glasses on. It's harder and harder to see. So sometimes it's you get these websites with really small print. It's really hard to visualize. Being able to have a screen reader really helps with that. There's other tools like Wave, Lighthouse, and Axe that'll help you, analyze how accessible your website is. Um, Give another example of say, an accessibility concern. Let's say uh, you had an image on your website that had, maybe it was a map or something like that. Well, someone who is visually impaired would not be able to see the map, but if they're using a screen reader, want to be able to know that there's a, visual of a map there, and maybe some sort of description around what that map is showing. And so adding extra parameters within your website on that image, not just sticking them, most website builders, you go in and say, I want to place a map right here on my page, and you just drag and drop it, done, save, close, right? Well, taking into consideration uh, disabilities, you'd want to annotate that image with extra text. So someone who was using a screen reader would be able to know the context of what that image is. Even if they can't see it, they would at least know that image exists and what that image is for. And maybe even if that image is giving some kind of information visually, give that information at least audibly to them through the text you annotate on that image. They understand what's going on. That's kind of the idea behind accessibility. Um, Last thing I'll say on that, I don't want to spend a lot of time on accessibility, and I could go on and on about this, but there's been some kind of crazy stories in the news about companies getting sued because their website wasn't accessible. There are some great plugins. I didn't list them here, but there's some WordPress plugins you can use if you're doing WordPress, and for the other platforms, there's certainly plugins as well to automatically add accessibility to your website. They're not perfect. They're not even great, but they are, at least if you're concerned from more of a legal perspective, which, I would argue maybe you should, think more than just, protecting yourself. But, those plugins will do a decent job of at least providing some accessibility to your website if you have none at all. And then you can always build on top of that. And so that's kind of what we recommend to people, is at least get the accessibility plugin built. If not, think about accessibility more. And really, again, it comes back, a lot of times when we're talking about website design, it comes back to who's your audience, who are you trying to target. And so depending on your audience, um, accessibility may be more or less important. I mean, I think it's always important, but there might be situations where you say, a plugin is going to be sufficient. I add a few different things versus, I've got a website that caters towards individuals, of which a large, percentage of those have disabilities. In which case, yeah, you certainly want to consider accessibility when you think about that. Moving on, because I want to make sure we get through this presentation in a timely manner. Look at things like AI-driven personalization. The idea behind this is, let's say that you go to an e-commerce site and you're wanting to find a red pair of shoes, size 10. So the idea behind AI-driven personalization is, rather than having to go through and click shoes, then click, size and click color, maybe being able to go in and just simply, maybe there's a thing that pops up and says, what are you looking for? Type in, I'm looking for red colored shoes of size 10. And it goes in and automatically starts to find that for you. That's the idea behind AI-driven personalization. Um, and so with these AI driven tools like that, you can actually provide that kind of experience to the end user, to be able to go in and interact with your website in a slightly different way than they have traditionally. And that's becoming more and more common. Hooking that up with some sort of AI backend, whether it's ChatGPT or whatever else, to basically provide those results back to the user. And then another one that's interesting is the voice user interfaces. These are, kind of a work in progress, I would say, because, the first thing you have to do with the voice user interface is be able to understand what the user's saying. If you don't understand what they're saying because of, for a variety of different reasons, maybe, the clarity of their voice isn't great, maybe their background noise, whatever is going on, this can obviously break that. But the idea behind the voice user interface is that, as you go in and interact, with the website, you're not just having to use your keyboard or your mouse or your fingers. If it's on a phone, you can actually talk to it. A good example are like the smart speakers we're starting to see in homes. I mean, it's slightly different, but if you've used one of those, sometimes they can be really good, and sometimes they can be really inaccurate in terms of providing results. And so that's why I say it's a little bit of a work in progress. And there's some, tools I mentioned here like Google Cloud speech to text, Amazon Transcribe, and IBM Watson has a speech to text feature that you can integrate with your website. Moving on to performance and technology. Um, this is where I get a little more excited as a developer because I'm always thinking about how to build things optimally. And so when we start thinking about things like core web vitals optimizations, what does that mean? It basically means like enhancing the speed of your website, the performance of your website, thinking about SEO, thinking about user experience. And so there's some great tools out there to be able to do some of those things. The first one that comes to mind by far is Google PageSpeed Insights. This is a great tool you can go and leverage to basically go in and analyze your website. It'll tell you how fast your website's loading. Um, and let's keep in mind, when you think about load time on a website, there's uh, the first bit that starts to show up on your screen, like you want a website that's responsive. You don't like click, someone on your website and it takes 10 seconds to load the next page. You want it to come up quickly, but you want the viewport, whatever is being shown the user, to load first, and the things below it to load later. Or I mean, ideally you want them all to load at the same time, but if you had to prioritize, you want the things at the top of the page to load before the things at the bottom of the page. And so tools like Google PageSpeed Insights will look at some of those things and give you some insights into that. There's other tools like Screaming Frog, SEO Spider, which is a tool I use quite a bit. It's not the greatest SEO tool out there, but I think it's pretty strong. It'll do a lot of technical SEO, which is an area where we focus a lot. So looking at things like, the metadata on your website. Do you have the title tags? Do you have a title tag on every page on your website? Or do any of the pages have the same title tag on them? Do you want to have, unique title tags for every page? Are the title tags too long where, Google's going to penalize you because the title's too long? Or are they too short? And so it'll analyze things like that within your website and provide a report on that. And there's, of course, other online tools. SEO Moz is one that comes to mind that'll provide some of those insights. And they all have different, like, I think SEO Moz is fairly expensive, but Screaming Frog, SEO Spider, if you have a simple website, it's free. So it's one we use quite a bit with our customers. Progressive web apps. So the idea behind a PWA is being able to provide app-like features. A lot of times what you see is, web experience and then also offering like a mobile app experience that's very similar to the website. What that does is allows you to have a mobile first kind of approach to building a website, but not spend all the money like you would on a dedicated mobile app. And so the PWA is going to deliver app-like features. It's going to have things like offline functionality, fast, seamless experience and performance. When I think about offline function, I'd like to share this story. We had a customer who was working there. They did surveys and audits of medical equipment inside of hospitals and places like that. And if you've ever been in a hospital and tried to use the internet, sometimes that can be questionable. A lot of times they'll have their own Wi-Fi and so forth. But if you're trying to connect through like your phone, for example, a lot of times you're not going to get any connectivity at all. And so this particular customer, they were wanting to be able to go and do these surveys, these audits, and then, but they couldn't always guarantee they would have internet access. So the ability to be able to go and do that audit, save all that stuff to their device. Then when they leave the hospital, they get back online where they have connectivity, they could upload the audit, upload that data back up to the cloud. And so that's an area where you'd see offline functionality being advantageous. Think about Google Docs, Google Sheets, all the Google products. And I think Office probably has the same thing. If you get on a plane where maybe you're not going to have connectivity while you're in the air, you can still work on your proposal. You can still work on your report because it has some offline functionality that'll then sync with the cloud when you're back, connected to the internet. Those are kind of things that you get from PWAs. And then last but not least, enhanced cybersecurity. So this is, good and bad of living in 2025. We've all experienced multi-factor authentication, the pain of that, of typing your username and password, and it sends you a code. You got to type the code in, or you have to do, a thumbprint reader thing to log in, or you have to pull up an authenticator app and type in the code before it changes. These are things that, again, it's not application for everybody. If you've got a simple brochure site, and you're a plumber, you probably aren't going to be too concerned about MFA. But if you're a doctor's office providing a patient portal to be able to review patient records and lab results and things like that, MFA may matter. Your bank, for example, logging into your bank to be able to view balances and do banking activity, obviously MFA matters as well. Things like data encryption, are obviously important. Again, different audiences, different applications require different levels of encryption. Use that same analogy. Brochure site, you probably don't care that much about data encryption, although you should at least have SSL, HTTPS working on your website. But if you're doing something more than that, uh, if you're a doctor's office or something, you might care about HIPAA concerns, and obviously data encryption is very important. And things like cyber attacks and backups are important as well. Um, being able to protect yourself from these attacks, and then being able to recover, being able to have a doomsday approach to this, where if everything goes wrong, you're at least able to restore what you had. And so having a good backup uh, policy in terms of backing up your website and all of the content and assets, so that you can always restore it if need be. Um, Last topic we're going to talk about is development tools and platforms. And so what we're going to go through here are, we're going to talk about few different things. The big one I've said early on in this was that we're kind of WordPress centric in a lot of this presentation. That doesn't mean WordPress is the best solution for everything. We actually position ourselves as an agency as an what we call agnostic in terms of tools and approaches to development. So whether we're building a website or a web or mobile app, or helping a business with automation, we like to look at what is the best tool uh, for the problem we're trying to solve, as opposed to trying to shoehorn in every problem we see into the technologies we're experienced with. And so that means we adapt. We're somewhat agile in our approach to solving problems, which I think is advantageous, but also means sometimes we're constantly challenging ourselves, learning new technologies. But going into development tools and platforms, I'd say, even given that approach of being somewhat agnostic, when we think about building a website for a standard business or organization, we're typically looking at WordPress. It's still kind of our preferred option. I think WordPress powers, close, I think it's close to 50% of the internet now is built on WordPress. And so that's a pretty strong statement. When you adapt WordPress, you get the whole ecosystem of all the plugins, all the integrations they have. If you're using a CRM or an ERP tool, or you want to have a shopping cart, anything you can imagine, events calendar, there's always, something out there. There's a variety of options to do that within WordPress. And so WordPress is still kind of our, preferred platform. But again, we want to understand, when we talk with the customer, we understand what their needs are, and then, find the right platform for them. There's other ones like Shopify and Webflow. One of the things I like about WordPress over Shopify and Webflow is the fact that WordPress is self-hosted, so you can host it anywhere. You're not tied to Shopify. You're not tied to Webflow and their servers and paying them. I can take WordPress for free, and I can go, you know, set up a website on WP Engine or GoDaddy, or I don't recommend GoDaddy, by the way, but it's a brand everyone's familiar with. Any shared hosting solution out there, you can set up your WordPress site on, whereas Shopify and Webflow and some of these uh, hosted solutions, no code solutions, while they're easier in some ways to build websites on, you're kind of tied to their platform and tied to their hosting. WordPress gives you a little less of a little more leverage in terms of where you may want to host. And so that's why a lot of times we recommend WordPress. And again, just the fact that it's so widely adopted, it's the most widely used platform, and tons of plugins for it. That does come with a price. WordPress is kind of bulky, and there have been cases where people want to build an app and have it integrate with their website. And while we'll use WordPress for that, but you can't build all that. A lot of times you can't build all the app kind of functionality you need within WordPress, or it becomes very inefficient if you try to build all that on WordPress. Then you end up having to build like a separate platform and have that integrate with WordPress. I'm going into too much detail for the context of this this webinar, but I wanted to at least share that. But there's also things like no code, low code solutions. The idea behind that is, a layman can come in and work on this. So, with a tool like Shopify, Webflow, Shopify a little bit less, but Webflow for sure, Bubble. If you're using a CRM, say like HubSpot has its own page builder that's a kind of a no code, low code solution, just drag and drop. So just like as you build a Word document, and maybe drag an image into the document and create bulleted lists, things like that. These web builders have that capability. WordPress has that too. If you use a WYSIWYG theme like Elementor or Divi, you can get that same functionality. But it kind of comes native with some of these other platforms. So sometimes that's a little less intimidating to a layman who's wanting to build a website. And so I think these are good platforms: Webflow, Shopify. You don't have to worry about hosting. You don't have to worry about DNS or IP addresses or anything like that. You can just go in, set it up. You can buy your domain name, build your website, publish it. you've got a website, you're good to go. And so again, it kind of comes down to the application, what you're trying to do. The last, collaboration tools. There's a variety of different collaboration tools out there. Um, One that we use quite a bit is GitHub. This is basically, I went ahead and included this. I was on the fence whether to really talk about collaboration tools, but the idea behind this is to being able to have multiple people work on things at once, especially when you get into custom design, custom development, where you're building, actually writing code like we do, writing software, being able to work in tandem with others and track changes and merge changes. If we're both editing the same file, being able to figure out, how to resolve those conflicts. Tools like GitHub help tremendously with that. Let's see, my screen is not, why it's not responding here. Oh, okay, it just went really far. Okay, let's do it again. Okay, well, next steps. Okay. So mentioned the recording of this webinar will be shared when this is over. So I'll be sending that out to you. You can also obviously share it with others who don't mind. Love for you to share it with others and hope it's helpful to you. And then I want to talk too about our special offer that we discussed earlier. So special offer is basically to mention a mini audit of your website. We'll go through and look at your existing website, give you some feedback on the good, bad, and ugly of your website. We try to do that with a pretty open mind and not just look at it as an opportunity to tell you everything's, we're not doomsdayers, the sky's falling, everything's wrong, and try to get you, sell you on, new website design. We'll tell you what looks good and what doesn't look good, and give you some options on maybe ways you can improve that, whether you do it yourself, go hire another developer, or come to us. And so that's kind of our free gift to you for attending this webinar. The way you get that is to come to, or actually you don't need to go anywhere. Just open your email and send me an email, dustin@caffeineinteractive.com, with the subject line "audit my website," and then provide the URL of your website. I mean, I see a number of you I'm familiar with, and I know your websites, and I've probably already done audits like this with you before. But I might be able to figure out your website from your email address, but it's easier just to list the URL to your website when you send out that email. Get into the Q&A. I hope you all have been, feel free to add any of your questions in here. Happy to address those. I see a few questions here already. I see one, I've got two questions here right now. It looks like someone may be typing. So let me start on the first one here. You mentioned website creation without coding expertise, but then a lot of the sites you shared have custom visuals and designs. What's realistic for me to do on my own? Yeah, so I mean that's a good question. I think it goes back to what are you looking for? If you're looking for a very complex, if you're a larger brand and serve a big audience, or have a lot of different types of audiences or roles coming into your website, um, then you probably want to look at working with an agency. If you're just starting up a new business and you've got $10,000 in your pocket and you're looking to just get a website up and going, you got other expenses, insurance costs, business cards, whatever it might be. In those cases, I would say, you probably do want to do things on your own. So that's the first thing, is just figuring out what makes the most sense. And even large, more exotic brands. I mean, there's multi-million-dollar companies that have websites that look like they're out of the 1990s, because they just don't do a lot of their business through their website. Most of it's done online, or done offline, or they're working with government agencies and so forth, where um, that's all done through proposals and documents being shared and things like that, and it's not so much done through the website. So that's the first thing I ask you, is how important is your website? Most every business needs some sort of website presence of some sort, right? And so that's where the website design becomes important. But to get to the question, what's realistic for me to do on my own? I mean, I showed some pretty exotic websites here with some of the custom illustrations. Obviously, if you wanted to build a website like that, you'd either have to be an illustrator or go hire a custom illustrator to build some of those images for you. I don't think that's very realistic for most people, and so I think when you can build a pretty simple website that's template based. If you go through Webflow or one of these other platforms I mentioned, Shopify, Squarespace. I don't think I had, for some reason I didn't list Squarespace on that one slide. I don't think. But Squarespace is another pretty good platform. You can just pull down a template, and it has all the design elements there. It'll have like an about page, a contact page, maybe it'll have like a products page or services page, whatever. and then you just go in and hover over the text and you can swap the text out. I think that works perfectly fine for people. It's not going to be super fancy. It's not going to be this, thing that's going to have all these bells and whistles and things popping all over the place and nice custom illustrations and all that. But I think it's still, it's more than valid depending on what your need is, and you can always grow into something more as things go along. So I don't think, the expectation shouldn't be you can build one of these fancy websites on your own, but you can build still a pretty good website, and it might be good enough. And I think sometimes we get too caught up with the aesthetics and the design. We don't think about the usability and like the audience and how they're going to interact with it. And I've seen plenty of cases. I mean, this is always a constant battle when we think about graphics designers versus user experience people versus developers like myself, is that we're always kind of in conflict with each other because I'm wanting to build things as optimally as possible as a developer. User experience person is wanting, something that's easy to use, very intuitive. And the graphics guy wants something beautiful, wants to, display something that's very artistic. And so sometimes too artistic can mean it's very difficult to use and not very easy to navigate, not very intuitive. And making things intuitive can sometimes make it look very boring and bland. And so that's something to keep in mind. But again, if you're looking for something pretty simple and you don't have a big budget, I think you can do something on your own and just keep it simple. Use a template. It's not going to have all those bells and whistles, but I think you'll be okay. I hope that answers your question. Okay, next, Jim, we have a website that was built about 5 years ago. It works for us, but I'm interested in some of the latest trends. How do you decide when a website should be redesigned? Okay, yeah, that's a good question. I think going back to some of what I said from the first question, uh, let's just start here. One of the first things we do with our with new clients when we're looking at either redesigning an existing website or building a website from scratch is we ask them who their audience is. Um, and based on that, you know, they might say, well, we have, customers who are buying from us, existing customers that are coming back to buy more. We've got, new prospects that are just checking us out, maybe interested in buying something or, purchasing one of our services. We may have investors. We may have customers coming back looking for customer support. So you want to think about all those different audiences and then make sure your website is catering to all those. If it's not, and you feel like it should, and then we have to talk about, okay, well, is that something? Is it like an add-on? I like to use construction analogies a lot. So you think about like a home. You say, well, like I've got a house, with one bedroom, and my wife and I are expecting a baby. Okay, well, should we go get a new house? Should we have the baby sleep in the living room, or should we add on a second bedroom? And it's kind of the same thing here. You can think of it that way. Do you add on, or do you need to go rebuild, kind of start over from scratch? So I think that's one place to start. From a technology perspective, you can certainly look at that and say, okay, well, if I'm using kind of an older technology that's end of life, then it might be worthwhile to go ahead and think about moving on, because at some point, the older technology gets, the harder it is to find places to host it, to keep it up to date. Um, think about like old code that was written back in the 70s on like Fortran versus modern day code that's written in newer software technologies and frameworks. There's a lot of old code that people still maintain that they keep alive in Fortran, but in most cases they've gone and rewritten a lot of that code. Sometimes they haven't for a variety of different reasons, and so it's kind of the same thing here with websites. You're going to look at that and have to decide. So I think the best way to go about solving that problem if you're trying to figure out if you should redesign your site is talk to someone. Like you can come talk to me. Of course, I'm in business to make money. I want to sell our services, but if you come to me, I can always have a conversation with you about, the good and bad of your website. Mention the mini audit that we're doing. You can come in and get mini audit going with us. Um, I just shared information on that again on the screen here if you're looking at that. Come and get a mini audit. We can walk through that with you. We'll, analyze that and tell you what we think about that. But I'm always happy to have a discussion with you as well. You can always just reach out to me at dustin@caffeineinteractive.com, set up some time to chat. Not going to charge you for it. We can just talk about, your current needs and what you're looking for. And that's sometimes a good way to go is, lean on an expert or someone you can trust, of course, because there's plenty of people, you could build a brand new website with all kind of flashy stuff and just perfect and go to an agency and they'll tell you need to rebuild it, right? Because they want to make money. And we try not to do that. Well, I would say we don't do that. We don't do that at all. We're always, looking at it in terms of building good karma and good relationships. And relationships built on trust, I think, are much more profitable than relationships built on trying to squeeze a some extra money out of someone. But that would be a good way to maybe go about looking at that is talk to someone. You're welcome to reach out to me and I can go through your specific case and help you decide on that. We did have one other question come in here. Let me see. How do you approach mobile versus desktop? For example, some of the websites are pretty flashy and not sure how the experience would work on mobile. Yeah, again, there's two approaches to mobile development. The kind of traditional and most widely used and still a very strong practical way to approach website development is what we call responsive design. And the other one is called adaptive design. Responsive design is what I was describing earlier, where like maybe you have a grid, or you have like say a row with three columns and three icons, and maybe it's like your different services that you provide listed side by side across a row. And when you go to mobile device, you can't squeeze those in. It's unreadable, so they stack. And that's usually done. That's not something you have to go as a developer when you're building a website. You have to go and say, okay, well, like I'm going to design it, for web, and it's going to be this wide. But when they go to mobile device, I've got to design it separately to be stacked on top of each other. Responsive design, it kind of just does that naturally. The way the libraries work and the theming and so forth, it kind of handles that automatically. And so that's what we call responsive design. Adaptive design, I wish I could think of a good example off the top of my head of where you'd use adaptive design, but adaptive design really comes up when you're dealing with a situation like I'll give you a good example, like say a map on a website. If you have a map that say it's an interactive Google map that you embed within your contact page. I've seen this where people have a map they put on their website. As you scroll through, um, the map takes up the whole screen. All of a sudden, you can't scroll anymore. As you scroll, you're moving the map around because there's nowhere to grab the actual website and scroll beyond the map. Um, and so that's the case where, you could do a responsive design where you make the map smaller, do something on mobile devices. So there's always, some width to be able to grab with your finger to keep scrolling through. Or you could make it where, that map experience is different on a mobile device than it is on a website. There's probably a better example than that. That's what I'm coming up with off the top of my head. But idea behind adaptive is that you make it very specific for the type of device. And so I think the more immersive and the more exotic you get with the website, and you have all these moving things going on, you've got, the custom illustrations and just that immersive experience, I think you're looking at more of an adaptive approach. So that does, you need to think about that. If you're going to build a website with that kind of luxury in it, that's fine. But you may end up having more work maintaining it across multiple devices than you would if you were just doing, more of a simple design or layout. So those are things to consider. Bottom line is, I mean, you certainly can make them work, but a lot of times you'll just find that the experience is going to be different across those devices. Um, versus if you go more of a traditional kind of responsive approach to website development, then you're maybe not adopting all that flashiness, but you're having something that fits a number of different devices. You're not having to do this adaptive approach of building different interfaces for the different devices. So I hope that's helpful. If not, feel free to reach out to me. I can clarify some of these questions for you. Any other questions? Anyone else have anything? Okay, great. All right. Well, I appreciate you all being here. Appreciate your time walking through this. It was really a pleasure. Again, if you have any questions, you can reach me at dustin@caffeineinteractive.com or at info@caffeineinteractive.com. Either one, both go to me. And let me know. Take advantage of this free audit offer. But otherwise, again, appreciate your time. Thank you so much, and I hope everyone has a good rest of your day. Thanks.